I've been traveling and doing more and more jobs off-site. So a couple years ago, I was hired to work in Park City, Utah, and cook for a facility during the Sundance Film Festival. It was really fun. We got to feed everybody from Beyonce to Mark Zuckerberg, and it just really started me getting more involved in going out there to cook in different situations. Then I went to Hawaii and cooked for a couple weeks, which was awesome. And the Hamptons idea, which is the first book, a former employee of the restaurant got wind of this job that was coming up. So 2 families were coming from each coast. They were thinking about getting married, the mom and dad, and they each brought 3 kids. They're extremely wealthy people, some of the wealthiest people in the country, and they'd rented this 40,000 square foot house, and they needed a cook. And so I'd never met them. I didn't interview with them. I just showed up in the middle of the night, and the book kind of happened as the first book just kind of happened. Like each night I was like, oh, they were making me crazy. They were making such demands, and it's 3 meals a day. Sometimes there'd be 30 people, sometimes there'd be 2. I had to do all the shopping. And so I've been a journal keeper my whole life. And suddenly, as I'm reading and writing, I'm like, maybe this is the inspiration for the new cookbook. So the first cookbook came out of that circumstance. So it's 16 days, exactly as they happened, with a mixture of all the recipes that I had to make during that time. So the book, and in the journal, and it's in the cookbook, it's like, this is the book, and what should I call it? How about Out There? So that's what happened for the first one. After I finished that job, I was in the city in New York for a couple days, and I used to live in New York. So I was staying, a friend of mine had recently moved into this house that's in probate. It's not a house, it's this 3-story penthouse that was completely redone in 1970, like she for 70s. You know, it's terribly dated now, but it was all chrome and wires, and the 2 men who built it are both deceased. So the apartment is just abandoned, except for now he's living there. And it's just an amazing house. If you've ever read Dickens, you know, like Mrs. Havisham walking around in her wedding dress, that's what this house felt like. And I'm walking through and I'm like, this could be the next book. And I'm like, what do you think about if I came back and I just cooked for you and hung out in this apartment for 2 weeks in February? So the first book had come out, and he's like, okay, let's do it. And the cool thing about the second book to me is I kind of knew the 2 men that built the apartment. They owned the building that the man who's living there now, he and I used to live together above Blue Man Group. You ever heard of them? Yes. The original theater on Astor Place. So we're right down the street. And I combined journals from 1989 with 2019 while I was there. And then I'm just cooking for a friend that I've had for 30 years, talking to ghosts. And the recipes are all recipes for 2 in the next book, which is kind of what makes it a little bit more special. They're different. The first book is summertime, family style. This New York book is recipes for 2 in the winter. So, yeah.
How many recipes are in the book?
In the New York book that we're talking about,
yes,
I think there's almost 70.
Okay.
And a lot of times I think people find it real challenging to cook for 2 because of, you know, excess. So I really wanted a book that taught people how to make just enough and not be threaded, you know, all sorts of leftovers. Yeah. So there's cakes for 2, you know, basically a big cupcake, creme brulee for 2, small batch cookie recipes, shopping for produce so that you don't waste it. So some tips like that.
What do you think is the, I don't know if I want to use the word advantage, but of like combining a book and a cookbook instead of, you know, doing like, I'm just going to write like a book based off of my journaling and then a separate cookbook. Why combine the 2?
Well, I want each book in the series to continually be more story, because I think that once you have the tools, it's learning more about what's motivating you to cook. So the situations really pushed me to cook what I had to cook for each thing. And I wanted them to be an unusual book. So if you see them, they are a coffee table book. They're not a book that you'd put on a shelf. They're very photocentric. This apartment in New York, it's so hauntingly beautiful that in the second one, the apartment really became a character of the book. And the two men who aren't alive anymore, even though I'd never really interacted with them, they're characters in the book. So it just worked for me. Yeah.
Did you always want to write cookbooks?
I've always been a writer.
Okay.
So cookbooks kind of, the first book that I did was 6 weeks of recipes as the restaurant did them. So Fresh came out in 2012, and the concept behind that was we're really making this food right now. We're testing the recipes right now. This is what your plate would look like if you came in for dinner. So that was the motivation for that book, and it also had a story, but successively the story's getting more interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite recipes in this one?
In the New York book, I love John's popcorn creme brulee. The story behind that is one of the men who lived the longest, he was a recluse in the apartment, and the only things he ate were popcorn and broccoli. That was it. So I think that that's a beautiful recipe. There's a recipe in it called Ask Me to Stay Chicken, and it was in the kitchen, which was fantastic. There were 4 Le Creuset pots, which are those enamel Dutch ovens. And it was like my last day, and I was really sad that I was leaving. So I make this chicken dish for my friend that I'm leaving, but I'm like, God, I really wish I could stay. And I'm drinking and I'm crying. So it was really, I love that recipe. It's basically just pulled chicken thighs, but really turns out nice. So and then I think all the salads are outstanding in it.
So you have like a wide range, because you mentioned earlier you have cakes and salads and
so it's in the Hamptons book I was cooking all day, so there's a lot of lunch and dinner. This I was mainly making dinner for 2, so it would be there's less recipes in the first book, but there are things that would really be usable for people. And the shopping list is done in a way that you could, and I hope that it reads this way, that if you wanted to, hey, I want to cook for 2 weeks for my husband, wife, or whatever, you could, it kind of explains how the shopping can be done. Yeah.
Okay. Did you have any challenges while writing this one?
I did, yeah. The most interesting one was personally this, you know how your life can split in a path just like that. And there could have been a chance that I would have married the man that I was cooking for, and I would have ended up living in this place. And there was a moment one night, because he lives in Pennsylvania with his new spouse, and I was like, I think I've died. And I was reaching out to people like, I think, can you make sure that that I didn't die on that day that I left Kansas, because I'm like in heaven? And there's some quotes in there. My mother had kept a journal, and in it was in the book is the last writings in her journal, which were, heaven sure is a beautiful place, but I wish I could go back home for a while. So to me, the strangest part about it, what I was wrestling with was, this is what my life really would have been had I taken a different path, and then what would happen if I would have died. So there's a segment in the book called Dead Seeds, and it's my favorite part of the book, but I traveled there. I've really been into pickled mustard seeds. So I had these mustard seeds I'd bought at Mobert's. It's a great recipe. I'm like, this is what I'm going to start with. And I get in there and I'm digging through the cupboards and I find old mustard seeds. And I'm like, I should use the old ones. And the seeds that were the men that lived there before my friend. And then at the end, I do the same recipe again with the new seeds. And it's just kind of like, what makes us valuable when we're young or when we're old? Or does the cook make the recipe, or does the recipe give the cook some life? So those are kind of the things that I went through. Shopping wise, it was that Arctic blast. It was super cold. There were 2 blizzards while I was there. used to live in Nashville after I'd left New York, and strangely, my flight, it got canceled the day that I was leaving. It was the day that I was going to put the kitchen back in order, kind of leave myself, and the blizzard caused my flight to be delayed through Nashville, which is where I used to live, and then back to Kansas. So I was like making this weird triangle. So yeah, those are the unusual things about the book.
Yeah. What are you looking forward to about people using this book?
I'm hoping that people will think about forgiveness in the kitchen, letting themselves make mistakes, talking about it, realizing that we all have those voices in our heads that are, doubting ourselves. And I think a lot of people get paralyzed by that in the kitchen. And to, just take another look at how they do things. My favorite line from the book is, I felt like I was losing my hunger before I started doing this traveling. Like, the restaurant, it's fine, but it's the same every day. And, if you lose the hunger, you got to take another bite.
Yeah.
So it was really an examination of what happens as you get older to keep yourself young.
Yeah.
At least mentally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did this book launch?
It just came out 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
It's brand new, yeah. And we didn't expect it until February. So when it came early, it was a little frightening because we still have a few of the first book left to sell.
Okay.
But they're moving quickly.
Where are you selling them at?
We're selling them at the restaurant, Round Table Books in Noto.
Okay.
They are available at the Nook in Baldwin City, Kansas. They are also in Manhattan at a place called the Winged Lion.
Okay. Are you selling them online at all?
You can mail order them.
Oh, okay.
So we can add shipping and send them to people, so you can call and we can get them mailed to you.
Okay, gotcha. How much is it?
It's $52. It's $47, $64, then tax, $52.
Do you have plans to do another one in this series?
Yeah, the next one, I went to Spain last year to cook for a family, and I was there for 7 weeks alone. And so that's the next one.
That'll be cool.
And that'll come out hopefully it'll be ready for next Christmas.
Okay.
And then number 4 is going to be out there, Kansas. So my thought is I'm going to find 8 different houses in 8 different situations in really picturesque parts of Kansas. So I really want it to be an ode to the state and the scenery and Flint Hills and to the Capitol and all that stuff. So yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah,
I love
so-
ideas.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have anything else you want to add?
There is, when will you put this in do you want to know when the book signings are? Okay, there is one Monday.
Okay.
There's one Friday, but that'll be too late.
Yeah.
Monday in Baldwin City.
Okay.
I'm going to be reading from the book and doing a Q&A. Saturday let's see. Got 4 of them in a row. Saturday the 14th, I'll be at Findables here in Topeka.
Okay.
And then Sunday the 15th, I'll be at the Winged Lion in Manhattan. And that's going to be another one where I'll have time for a Q&A and reading from the book.
Okay.
So,
I had a couple questions actually.
Yeah.
You said that the books are very photo heavy.
Mm-hmm.
So who are the artists that you got to work with to create some of that?
Katie Young, and definitely Katie Young should be mentioned in the article. She was the editor, Katie and Young.
Okay.
Forever Young Marketing is her company here in Topeka. And the New York book, she directed both of them kind of artistically. Most of the pictures were taken with the iPhone. Katie flew up. She's like a daughter to me. Her and her husband flew up with me and my husband, and we got to stay in the apartment when Chris was gone. So she took a lot of photos of the apartment on a nice camera. But all the food shots came from the iPhone.
Okay.
And then Amanda Nelson did the layout. She's the graphic designer. But yeah, mentioning Katie in there would be a big deal. All the books have a section that's what the restaurant cooked while I was gone.
Okay.
And all the cooks in there's pictures, and all their recipes are the last section of the books.
Cool.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I like how you're able to kind of include some of that work as well into it too.
And it's part of the story, This is they had to figure this out while I was gone, and I'm real curious how I'll incorporate that with Spain, because it's such a lot. They were alone for so long.
Can you just really kind of briefly talk about the restaurant itself then?
Sure.
I don't really know a whole lot about it, but I'm very curious, obviously, so kind of a little bit from the start.
Yeah, we are 14 years old, and I've got a little information brochure that would help. I had 2 restaurants in Nashville, Tennessee. This is my hometown, though, so when my father passed, I moved back to Topeka looking for a spot. I love this building. I mean, I bought 2 of them. The day it went for sale, I was walking to the Y to go swimming from the Celtic Fox, which is my brother's bar. And I called a realtor. I'm like, can I go see that building? And I'm like, there's no way this could be a restaurant. No way. You know, there's all these stairs and but I'm like, I love it. It's perfect. None of it looked anything like this. There was nothing in the back. It was completely a mess on the inside, but I fell in love with the place immediately. And what I was looking for was to do lunch. That's what the restaurants were in Nashville, but I kept kind of having roadblocks on Kansas Avenue at that time. And so I revamped my business plan, and my next step that I wanted to do as a cook was dinner. And my favorite cook is in Nashville. She changes her menu every day, and she has a big menu. I mean, not like huge, but there's like 5 appetizers, 5 starters, and 6 or 7 entrees. But I knew I needed a place that would slow people down because of the stairs. People would have to seek it out, so I thought we needed to be a nicer restaurant. So it was really a combination of all my favorite places in a location that I'm really fond of. So I love the house. I got it in July, and we were doing events, but we didn't open until April the next year. And at first, I was able to do all the cooking myself, but you know, we've gone through periods now. We have 20-some employees, and we started lunch a couple years ago, which lunch stays the same, but the dinner menu changes every week. So I have extreme attention problems. So a menu that changes keeps me having to think all the time, and it used to be really stressful, but now once I started training new cooks, it's, you know, you just kind of, oh, it's not that hard, just move things around a little bit. So that's how the restaurant's gone. So we've had great years and quiet years, and it's a place where we have lots of regulars. If you walk through the back, but in the spring and summer it's full for lunch. It's really beautiful. Dave does all the gardening. He's a horticulturist. He used to work at Skinner's. So it's mostly cut flowers, but then there's a lot of herbs. We grow most of our own herbs and a few supplemental plants. It's a fun place.
That's awesome.
And our premise is to keep young cooks coming through. So I'm not, even though I get all the credit, I don't actually work in the kitchen. I'm just the editor. So we've had, you know, most cooks go through for about 2 years and they're ready to move on. Yeah.
That's awesome. And so, because I don't feel like that many restaurants like yours here. You feel like you really have that market?
I think we're a unique restaurant in the world,
Yes.
personally. There's not a lot of places that have success with an evolving menu that changes so often. So you really have to get people's trust. So even though people might be hesitant on a certain menu like one week, I've gained their trust. So people know that it might sound a little funny, but basically it's going to be comfort food in the end, and we're really able to, I think, get people to relax. So for a long time, Topeka was lacking a nice restaurant. So now it's nice that you know, New City was our go-to place, and it changed, but you know, now we've got Luis's Place and Chez Yazoo. The Weather Room, I think, is a fantastic place. White Linen, Adam grew up in this kitchen. This was his first job.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot more places now to go.
Yeah.
So it's exciting in Topeka on the food scene, I think.
Yeah.
And everybody's got to keep their game up, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a great thing, though. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
And you said you grew up here, so to come back after all those years, what were like some of the things and aspects that you saw about Topeka that, obviously, because of situations you came back from, but now actually being here and seeing it develop? Have you really seen a lot of that?
I went to Assumption grade school, and so I went to the Capital Journal every week to drop off the lunch list because my mom was the lunch lady. So I was very familiar with the building. And I left in 1989. And I left when Macy's was still downtown. I worked downtown. I've always loved Topeka. I just wanted to see what else there was in the world. So I missed the 20-year segment where Topeka's self-esteem just kind of plummeted. And I never really understood it. I never bought into it. And when I had the opportunity to come back, I still am not fazed by it. Like, you know, you got to live where you live. So stop bitching about it. And when you interview for a job next door, if you say one bad thing about the town, I'll correct you once and I'll say, I don't ever want to hear that from you, or else you should move away. So I think it's a great city. I've lived in a lot of awesome places, and I still like it here. You know, it's yeah.
That's a lot.
And this new twist that's happening in the last few years. It's exciting, but I always liked it anyhow. And living downtown, like, even though I like all the people down here, like Sundays, man, if you live downtown, you have the whole city to yourself.
Yeah.
I'm a runner, so like, you can go everywhere, and it's fun to be in a town this size. And I hate traffic. You know, there's so many good things about it here, and everybody's nice for the most part.
Well, I feel like you're in a good location. Like, you're not right in the thick of it, but you're close enough where you can just like walk to Kansas Avenue.
Yeah, well, I like our separation a little bit too, and we also have a backyard here. I think that's when you get into a lot of the buildings that are down there without a backyard, it's tricky. So, and since we live here next door, we can go out real easily.
Right. Yeah.
You know, lunch is a really good introduction to the restaurant because I think our lunch menu is, we call it enlightened comfort food. So you might be having something that sounds familiar, but you're getting it made in a way with a lot more integrity, lightened up, lots of vegan and vegetarian choices, and just kind of tantalizing all your senses, which is what I think a meal should be doing anyhow. So yeah, it's a good way to try us out.
Thought about opening up another restaurant in the Midwest, like Kansas City area?
I've thought about it, but I think this is my last rodeo.
Yeah.
I'm not a young man anymore.
Same.
I'm liking I really am working towards having the out there, going off-site to do more things, and then also being able to bring an audience with me. Like when I went to Spain, I was like, I want to buy a house here and bring groups from Topeka and help them understand Spain a little. You know, so it gets scary sometimes when you travel foreign countries, but having like a bed and breakfast where you were learning to cook part of the time, and then also had time to go out and do things. And when I do the book on Kansas, I think I'll get a good feel on how I can do more events within the region. Yeah, and abroad. Yeah.